JustKapital Limited is a leading provider of financing solutions for litigation. These solutions include case funding, disbursement funding, and adverse cost insurance. To tell us more, please welcome their Executive Chairman and Managing Director, Mr. Philip Kapp, to the stage.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to present to you guys. I was a lawyer for 30 years, a slightly different lawyer in that I started things like Anderson Legal and have always been involved in business. I was formerly sort of a private equity lawyer, and through that I raised probably $15 or $20 billion worth of capital for the private equity funds. Classically, I got tired of being a lawyer. I then started JustKapital. For me, it's a whole new world. I had, I've worked on most of the really big deals in Australia, and suddenly I was listing a company with a market cap of about 30 or 40 million, depending on the day. In terms of litigation funding, and having been a partner in 4 of the biggest, best law firms in Australia, the one thing that we've worked out is that even small to mid caps can't afford to litigate. The average case, it's 5 or 10 million, really before you get out of bed. And so if you're a small company, sorry, can you hear me? It's pretty difficult to actually enforce your rights. So that's kind of where we started, and we've grown litigation funding to we have now a little over $2 billion in claims. However, as I got into it, I discovered there was this whole world of disbursement funding, which is really funding lawyers, and particularly in the personal injury world, where a lot of the lawyers are in the no-win, no-fee, which means that they carry the fees themselves and the disbursements. So we've sort of moved into that. We bought a company called Macquarie Medico Legal. We raised $20 million from Challenger as debt, and we started moving into that really at the beginning of, halfway through last year, and that's gone really well. The third part of the business is insurance, which I'm actually going to skip over because it's quite technical and it relates to security for costs, but it's very lucrative. We've just started that. So to talk first about, sorry, how do I make this change? So as I said, we've got those are 3 businesses: disbursement funding, litigation funding, and insurance broking. The company's just 2 years old exactly. These are some of the highlights which we put out to the stock market. Our disbursement funding has reached 8.2 million. Our receivables book has got to 21.7 by 31 December. It's now over 24 million. We're growing at about 37% per annum, and we're really just getting started. One of the things that I did and got lucky is I hired a general manager to run the disbursement funding business, a guy called Anthony Hirsch. He's at the back there, and we're happy to answer any questions after this. It's incredibly profitable. Our gross margin is about 45%. So what's happened is we've morphed into a finance company, and the great thing about disbursement funding is we don't lend to mums and dads. I'm allergic to mums and dads in a big way. So we don't need things like consumer licenses. Our counterparty is a law firm. Law firms are great people to lend to because the commercial banks only want a mortgage, and they want to mortgage the house, the cat, the dog, the children. Whereas we give them finance. All we do is take a guarantee from the partners. And the other great thing about lawyers is if they default, they lose their license to practice. So they have a very high incentive not to default, so we have very low default rates. And in a bad case scenario where a law firm, for instance, went into receivership, the Law Society steps in and makes sure nobody loses out. There's a compulsory law firm insurance. So we sort of stumbled into this niche of financing lawyers, and most people can't believe how good our counterparty is. So we're pretty excited by that. On the litigation funding, as I said, we've only funded 8 cases. We don't have a win yet, but we're getting very close. The neat thing about litigation funding, there are 2 really good things. One is in litigation funding, there's no connection really between your investment and your return. So we typically charge, our fees 30 to 35, sometimes 40% of the amount recovered. And it's just a question when the case resolves. 98% of cases are settled. So statistically, you're on a pretty good spot. So $100 million case, you may only spend $2 million on it. We get our $2 million back plus 30 million. So we haven't settled one yet, but we're getting close because we've been going for 2 years. That's a good thing about litigation funding. The bad thing is you're in the hands of the lawyers and the judges, and you have no ability to really predict. For instance, we had a trial starting yesterday, and it got postponed for 6 months. So that's the bad thing about litigation funding. So this is just some financial stats on the disbursement funding and funding of the law firms. Since we bought the business of Macquarie Medical Legal, you'll see we've grown net revenue by 56%. The gross margin has gone up by 76%, and our EBITDA has gone up over 200% since we took the business over. Our net profit for the half is 1.615 million, a growth of 336%. So the business is going really well. And one of the reasons is because not only are we paying for disbursements, but we're providing the lawyers with short-term finance. We're doing that at a simple interest rate of an average of 5% per month. And we really have the lawyers queuing up to access that finance. It's short-term. Usually we get repaid within sort of 6 months. As I say, we're just kicking it off. And my real trick is to raise a much larger amount of debt than the 20 million we've got, because we can put a huge amount out to the law firms, who, as I say, are great counterparties. That's the list of cases which you guys can have a look at. Our pipeline of cases is about 1.75 billion. For almost all of those, we're on a 30% to 40% return. Depending on usually as the case progresses, we up our return because we're obviously spending more money. And so it's an incredibly interesting company. It started with me starting a litigation company, and we've wound up a finance company. And I predict we love the core litigation, but the finance element, there's no one else doing it. We literally have no competitors. No one's lending money to lawyers on short term. There is some competition in the disbursement funding, but they tend to be people who provide medical reports. No one's really taken to providing the full suite of disbursements. So that's it. I think I should say this, but I think we're horribly undervalued. I've spent my life buying and selling companies. I think we're probably worth 4 or 5 times what our market cap is. But you would expect me to say that. Thank you.